Do you want to stay more focused on the right goals in your life, or even just figure out what the right goals are for you? Do you want clarity? Do you want better work-life balance? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Success Through Failure.
Welcome to the Success Through Failure podcast, the show that reveals failure as your path to success. You'll listen to intriguing interviews with some of the most successful people on the planet and learn how their failures became a launchpad for success and how yours can too. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, speaker, and personal coach, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Success Through Failure. Today I bring you Steve Garland. Before I bring on my guest, I need to share something important. For years, I struggled to feel confident around the type of people that I spend much of my time with. Successful people, millionaires, CEOs, leaders. And part of it was mindset. But part of it also was how I looked. You know, they say look good, feel good, as the saying goes. And I didn't look good. I didn't have clothes that made me feel confident. So I started buying expensive shirts. Then I had to get them tailored fit to me, my body, my athletic build. And then I discovered a new shirt. It's not only designed by athletes for athletes, but it's designed to fit an athlete's body type. And it's made of athletic material. It's like putting on your favorite workout shirt. But it's a business shirt. It's machine washable. It's wrinkle free, which is a deal breaker for me. I hate high maintenance clothing. And it looks better than the expensive shirts that I used to buy. And it even costs a little bit less. So I feel more confident now that I'm wearing good-looking, well-fitted clothing that's designed to fit me, to fit athletes. If you want to see it, I actually shot a quick, short video of me opening my second shirt. Yes, I got a second shirt, and I'm going to be buying more. To show you the fabric and the fit, just go to jimharshawjr.com, grab the coupon code, and take a look for yourself. You can actually try one totally risk-free because it's free shipping for my listeners with that special discount code at jimharshawjr.com/shirt. And returns, exchanges, 100% free within 30 days. So there's absolutely no risk to try one out. Again, jimharshawjr.com/shirt. This is my first time modeling clothing, so don't laugh. The shirt's awesome, but my modeling skills, not so much. It's probably worth checking out the page just to see my bad modeling. Again, jimharshawjr.com/shirt. A master motivator and speaker, Steve has traveled the country telling his story and inspiring audiences. Steve's childhood was layered with periods of instability, bouncing back and forth from his mother to his father, and Steve and his twin brother ultimately settled into the single-parent lifestyle, being raised mostly by their mother. Steve has witnessed firsthand the destruction that addiction and violence and incarceration can do to a family, but the experiences weren't all bad. He believes now that it was the storms in his life that have ultimately brought him to a place of purpose, peace, and hope. Finding his way in life through sport and the guidance of a few key people, he ended up at the top public university in the nation at the University of Virginia, Wahoo Wah, go Hoos, where he found himself wrestling for the national championship in front of 15,000 people and millions more watching on ESPN. Steve is now mentoring young men as the head wrestling coach at the University of Virginia. Now, as usual, if you don't have time to listen to this entire episode, or if you hear something that you like, maybe it's a quote, but you don't have time to write it down, be sure to grab your free copy of the action plan from this episode, as well as get access to action plans from every episode by going to jimharshawjr.com/action. And if you're wondering, yes, I did wrestle at the University of Virginia. And yes, Steve and I are friends. This is my show, and I can bring on whatever guests I want to bring on, and I'm bringing on a good friend of mine, Steve Garland. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I've really been looking forward to being on your show. I love what you're doing, Jim. Again, as you mentioned, regardless of our friendship, I just love what you're doing with this show, and I'm just honored to be on it. Yeah,
and just like you said, to echo that, regardless of our friendship, your story has just amazed me from the day I met you back in 1990, I guess 5 it was, and just sort of seeing everything that you've done and achieved since then. It's just been absolutely amazing. So, Steve, let's start with this. Tell us about your life growing up.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version. I was born and raised in Middletown, New York, and definitely want to give a shout out to Middletown. Middletown is a little small town, and I guess it's considered upstate New York. I used to get offended when people would say that growing up, because I wanted to be considered tough and like we're like the city, because we were only an hour from New York City. And so growing up, for whatever reason, we all wanted to be just like those kids, and so it was definitely it was an awesome, really life as a child growing up till about the age of 8. I mean, I really just remember all good memories up until that point. I mean, I on my dad's side, there's 8 Irish Catholic aunts and uncles, so a huge family. And Grandma and Grandpa were the patriarch and matriarch of that clan. And I just remember having great times growing up at their house on Pine Street in the pool, and dozens, literally dozens of cousins and all that stuff. And then on my mom's side, my mom is Italian. Her maiden name's Barbario. And so we had a restaurant business on that side. So I remember growing up in the restaurant. I remember being in the kitchen. I remember seeing the dishwashers and the cooks. And I remember going and ordering stuff at the bar with my Uncle Joey. And so it was just a really cool childhood. And then, like a lot of kids nowadays in this time we live in at least in the United States, is divorce hit when I was, I think 8 or 9. I think it was when my dad left. And it was rough. I mean, it was, not to be dramatic, it was definitely very negatively impactful to us. It led to, and that kind of evolved over time into different things, whether it be custody battle, whether it be bouncing. You mentioned me bouncing back and forth. I actually had to write this down this morning as I thought about this in the shower. I got out and thought about how unstable my life was for a large stint. And it was, in 6th grade, I lived on Prospect Avenue in Middletown. In 7th grade, I lived with my grandparents, with my dad. In 8th grade, I lived in an apartment complex. In 9th grade, I lived back with my grandmother on my mom's side. In 10th and 11th grade, I lived on Sunnyside Avenue in a house we rented. And in 12th grade, I was back with my nanny, my grandmother on my mom's side. So between grandparents on both sides and both mom and dad, essentially for 7 years straight, I was in a different house, a different place with a different person almost every year for 7 years. I mean, so if I had to sort of sum up what was your life like growing up, I would say unstable. I would say there was a lot of unrest, instability, and frankly, a lot of distrust on my part of a lot of people, and a lot of searching. There's a lot of longing going on in my heart. And my twin brother and I, we never sat down and had this sort of, official conversation. I don't think we were intelligent enough or mature enough to do it, but we kind of decided at a young age, I think it was around 7th, 8th grade, when we were sitting in this apartment complex in Middletown by ourselves again, because look, my parents were doing the best they could. My mom was working sometimes 2 and 3 jobs. My dad was across the river, what they call across the river, which means he was working over the bridge, an hour commute back and forth and working all the time. And so we were just alone a lot. And we just kind of decided we're going to do this thing called life on our own. And we just really got caught up in a kind of a crazy group of kids. John Lowry, Dale Lowry, Eric Hasbrook. These are guys that became our protectors and became our caretakers and good friends of ours that lived in Dave Moore housing project. It was a housing project right across the street from where we lived. And we got in with those guys and to fast forward a little bit, it was a lot of good things that we had a lot of good times with those folks, but there was also a lot of things I saw that I can't ever get back and can't ever get out of my head. I mean, I saw a lot of violence. I saw drugs, alcohol. I saw a lot of things and heard a lot of things that a kid at that age shouldn't have heard. And, I think that's where wrestling came into my life and changed that instability and that lack of focus really, and that searching into a pure focus into, hey, I'm going to be somebody, I'm going to do something, and this is where it's going to be in my life. And that became both positive and negative. It became who I was. I poured everything I had and became almost borderline obsessed with the sport of wrestling because I felt like that was the first thing in my life that I felt that I could hold on to. Sorry, that probably went too far. That was probably a little too deep. But
no, it was good. That was perfect. I feel guilty sometimes on this show because I have astronauts and billionaires and CEOs and Olympians and, just people who are in sort of, roles in society where we traditionally call them quote unquote successful. But I don't really have that many just regular people like you and I on the show, or I guess I wouldn't even consider you regular. You're in a very high profile position, as a Division I head coach. But there's people like your mom, right? Who had a really hard time for a long time, and now she's in this amazing place in her life and come through a lot of things in an incredible life. Everybody's story is unique. Everybody has their own challenges, and I just happen to have people on this show who are maybe they have, they're known because they're a TV show host or they've been an Olympian or something like that. But there's so many amazing people out there who can teach us so many great lessons, and I think your mom's one of them, actually. So you talked a little bit about, the things that kids shouldn't see, and I don't know how deep you want to go into that, but in your bio, talk about addiction and violence and incarceration and what that can do to a family. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, first I want to touch on, thank you so much for bringing up my mother. I mean, you think about the people that have influenced you and helped you along the way. I have to put her at the front lines of that. She's the hardest working person back. I didn't appreciate it at the time because I was a stupid punk kid, but looking back at everything she sacrificed for us and everything she did for us to provide and to make sure that we always had everything we needed. We didn't have everything we wanted, but we always had absolutely everything we needed. And it was directly because of her. I mean, I can remember walking into the living room one night and seeing her balancing her checkbook and how stressed she was and how she was in a borderline panic because she knew we didn't have anything left in there. And I can remember being on the grocery store and seeing the stress on her face when I wanted to get a box of cereal that I didn't need, but that I wanted because it was like, the Fruity Pebbles that I dug. And I remember how I knew it was, I could see on her face it was going to stretch her, but she did it because she always did what she could for us. Things like that, and then as I got older, what I saw was this intense grinding mentality for this woman that whatever job she took, she was going to be a battler. And I just got such a deep respect for that. And so I just wanted to hit on that. But as far as the things I saw, my father when he was sober, was an awesome dad. I mean, he was our football coach in Little League and, always taking us to the field and playing ball with us, all the cool stuff that dads do with sons. But the other side of him was he's always been a struggling alcoholic, and he's also struggled with depression his whole life. I mean, it got to the point where I can remember one of the most impactful moments of my life when I came home in 8th grade from school and he was sitting on the couch drinking. And he hadn't drank in, I think, 2 or 3 years. And I knew right then that it was going to be a rough go after that. And since that day, he's never been sober. Since that day, and I don't care if he hears this. I mean, that was the moment I think it was 1989. I can remember even the smell of the house. I can remember the color of the chair he was sitting on when he was drinking the Coors Lights. And I can remember thinking, this is really, really bad. And since then, he's never been stable. It's been one big one more pit after another for him, and now he's really struggling to this day. And I love him still, and pray that he'll be unleashed, unbound of those chains of addiction that he struggles still with. But also my twin brother, who again I love to death, but he ended up doing some time in a federal prison, maximum security penitentiary, and I can remember taking my wife there to visit him for the first time, and then she met him in a federal prison. I can, a lot of other guys in my family that I looked up to dealt with depression and mental illness, and I've seen all of it. I've seen just about everything that a human being can see, I would imagine, in that nuclear family setting. And so, I think as tough as it was, what you mentioned in the introduction is that it was those storms in life that, and those hard things in my life that actually have helped me become the guy I am today, and what I continues to shape the way that I face adversity now.
I've said this before on the show for the listener. It's easy to sit, where you're sitting and listen to this, to another guest talk about this difficult life, but it was reality. Like there was, it's easy for Steve to just sit and talk about this, but at one point in his life, these things were real. He really did walk in the door one day and see his father sitting there. He really did experience these feelings, and depression's a real thing, and it really affects people. And the more I think it's accepted these days to admit that depression is a real thing and that mental illness is a real thing, and to get help for it. And I even see, like your brother. I know your brother, and he's a good dude. I like him. He's a guy that obviously he made some bad decisions, but he's a person that this could happen to anybody. I really see that good people make bad decisions. I remember once someone telling me, someone I respect very much, said good people make bad decisions, and there's a lot of good people that are, that have been incarcerated that just made bad decisions along the way. So let's talk about this, Steve. Who are some of the people that kind of helped you? You talked about your mom. I mean, was it a wrestling coach, or were there other people that kind of helped you along the way?
Yeah. Well, first, I'll tell you, you mentioned him. My brother was one of the first people to help me along the way, believe that or not. I want to be clear that my brother is one of the toughest, mentally and physically, and one of the most charismatic human beings you'll ever meet. I mean, he's an amazing guy in his own right. And like you said, he went down the wrong road and made a series of bad decisions that then led to where he was, but he's doing great now. And he'd be a great guy to interview, frankly, for what he saw and how he survived in the place he survived. I went there. I used to have to go visit him. I used to almost crap my pants walking into the prison he was in, and I'm not making that up. I would be so sick to my stomach walking in and so filled with fear that I wouldn't look anybody else in the eye because I was so scared. And he was thriving in there. I mean, the guy is a survivor, and he's tough, and he did it. And so I learned a lot from him growing up of what toughness looked like. And also, I learned a lot about love. That dude loved the heck out of me. And every time I went anywhere, I had somebody that had my back. It was an awesome way to go through life. I never walked into anywhere with him with me, knowing with anything other than courage. As far as I would say that the two other guys that really helped me in my life were, yes, absolutely, my two high school coaches, my Randy Keys and Paul Cummings. Absolutely, without question, were the two most influential males in my life because they changed my life in this way. They looked me in the eye and said, "Steve, I believe in you. You can do this." Randy Keys grabbed me in 8th grade and said, "Son, you can be a state champion, and I love you, and I'm going to be here every step of the way. If you trust me, and if you do what I'm telling you to do, if you come with me and leave the lifestyle you're living right now," because at that point in my life, my brother and I were completely off the rails. I mean, I'm talking out of control. My mom doesn't even know half the things we were into. I mean, every Christmas, a little bit more gets snuffed out, gets seeped out and taught in heart to hearts. But we were absolutely, without question, going down the wrong road. And it took that man grabbing me and loving me enough to tell me the truth. And he said, "Listen," he goes, "here's your options. I'm going to take you to the Bronx and drop you off, and we're going to see how tough you really are. You think you're so tough hanging out with all these thugs and doing all the things you're doing? I'm going to leave you there for dead. Then we're going to see how tough you are. Or your other option is you come with me and let me make something out of you." And of course, I chose option B. I said, "I want to go with you, coach." and that was it. It took that. And then all of a sudden I really did started to believe in myself. I started to think I can do this. And then when I got to high school, it was Paul Cummings, my head high school wrestling coach, who just started investing in me before practice, after practice, sitting with me on the bus, sitting with me in the stands. And I just knew that when I had that guy around, I could do anything. I could conquer any mountain. I could beat anybody on the mat. I could do anything I set my mind to because Coach Cummings said I could. And so those guys were the first ones to teach me that. And I think it's still to this day, I think it's the number one thing a coach can do for their athlete is just help them believe in themselves, help them truly believe they can do something that almost seems impossible.
Yeah, I've said many times, we all need an unreasonable person in our lives that holds us to a higher standard than we believe that we can attain. Amen. I'll say it again. We all need an unreasonable person in our lives who holds us to a higher standard than we believe that we can attain. And as an athlete, you have that. And we get out into the real world, and a lot of times we don't have that. We lack that sort of structure. I think it's so important to find a coach, find a mentor, find a mastermind group, find people to surround yourself with that can provide that for you. And Steve, so now you're in a role where you're a Division I head coach, and you're a parent. You have 2 daughters, but you're also the sort of adoptive parent of a bunch of high school kids when they come and join your team. I don't want to just talk about the weaknesses of the generation, but I'd love to hear both your thoughts on maybe strengths of this younger generation, but also what you feel they're lacking, and you can kind of maybe reflect that a little bit based on your upbringing, but just your experience as a coach working with young people.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I would say the biggest strengths that I've seen, especially in the last six years of working with the guys I've worked with, I'm really blessed to work with overachiever type kids here at Virginia. I mean, it's the number 1 public school in the country. It's a really hard academic environment on top of everything we put them through athletically. And what I've seen is in this generation, these kids will work. These kids have attention to detail. These kids will do extra. They will do everything it takes and then some in order to achieve something. I mean, whatever their goal is, they'll spend the whole summer working out without taking a week off. I mean, Jim, you remember our team in college. It wasn't like that, Right. I mean, you'll have 22 guys on a double session 2-a-day schedule, 5 days a week in the heart of the summer. You'll have guys traveling to tournaments. You'll have guys meeting with our nutritionists, meeting with our sports psychologists. They'll use every resource available, and I think that's amazing. I would have never – you could have had a gun to my head. I wouldn't have talked to a nutritionist when I was in school, because I knew better. I knew better than everybody. And there was a stigma attached to meeting with sports psychologists. There was, you didn't want to, I would never use sports medicine, and I would have never gone in there and done rehab because I felt like, that was being a sissy. I mean, if I'm being honest. And nowadays, these kids aren't like that. They'll sit down, they will ask the questions, they will listen to that. And the resources you give them, they will use they'll use every day, every way they possibly can. And I think that's pretty amazing for this generation. Now, what that creates, though, unfortunately, you asked what are they lacking or sort of what are the downsides of that? The flip side of the coin is because they live that life, because most of them do everything right, it's developed this weird sense of entitlement that they actually they almost get to the point where I do everything, so I deserve this. I do A and B and C, so I deserve D. Does that make sense? And what I try to explain to them is there's no perfect equation. You can't just you still have to earn it. There's not just because you live a certain way, you should live a certain way because that's what you take pride in, living that way. You want to be that person, not because you expect to demand a specific result. Obviously, living A, B, and C and doing A, B, and C, we think gives you the best chance and the best opportunity to put you in a position to get that outcome you want. But you have to be very careful with almost this panic when they don't achieve what they want to achieve. It's almost like they look at me in the face like, how in the world could this possibly happen, Coach?
I remember you saying deserves got nothing to do with it. I think it might have been Clint Eastwood's line originally, but giving a talk to the guys one time saying, deserves got nothing to do with it.
Thanks, Jim. That was my favorite speech of all time with my athletes right before the blood round. And for those who are listening and don't know, the blood round in our sport is the most dramatic round in wrestling. It's simply this. If you win, you get your dream. If you lose, you're heartbroken, laying on the concrete, face down, crying. And I told these guys before that round, I said, deserves got absolutely nothing to do with it. And that's exactly right. I got it from Clint Eastwood in the movie Unforgiven. It's the last scene of the movie, one of the last scenes of the movie. And I won't go on from there, but you can watch the movie. It's a great line and something that I've tried to apply to these guys and something I'm still trying to get them to understand, that you can't be fixed on the outcome, get fixed on the process. And when you do that, there'll be joy in the process and not anxiety in being fixed on the outcome.
So you've gone from a place where most people don't achieve the level of success that you've achieved in your life. You were an NCAA Division I national runner-up. You were the National Assistant Coach of the Year, voted by your peers as the National Assistant Wrestling Coach of the Year. You're a Division I head coach. You've coached Virginia into the top 10 in the nation. What habits, like the listeners like to get habits, like sort of hear the kind of things that you're doing, the kind of things that successful people do. What habits do you feel like you've done or that you have that have maybe set you apart that helped you achieve success?
Well, I think, you know what, Jim, I think I'll answer it this way is I think the two habits that I think that have helped me, I don't want to say with achievement, but more with relationship. We talk all the time. You and I both have had this heart to heart before personally, is relationship is the essence of life. Relationship is the most important thing in our lives. And I think what's helped me develop and build strong professional relationships and personal relationships are these two things: responsiveness and follow through, especially in a professional setting. Responsiveness and follow through. Responsiveness meaning when my boss asks me to do something and gives me a deadline, I have to work with a sense of urgency to honor her and make sure that I get that done quickly, and what that reflects, in my opinion, it shows, listen, I care about my job and I care about you and I care about our relationship, and I'm going to honor you by handling this I'm going to get back to you and I'm going to get that done quickly in a timely fashion. There's going to be no missed deadlines here. And I think what's happened over the years is I've gotten a respect and an admiration from the people that have worked with me and around me because of that. I think it's helped build bridges and not tear them down. And that's helped me that's helped make a great working experience for the last 10 years at the University of Virginia. I can tell you that. And when I was a young assistant at Cornell, I know that it helped my bosses refer me to Virginia and give me references with no hesitation because of something like that. And follow through is the same concept. Follow through is just when you say you're going to do something, you follow it through to completion, asking as least amount of questions as possible, getting it done on your own time, in your own way, and getting it done so that the boss doesn't have to worry about it or even think about it. But they know and they can trust that it's going to get done. It's going to get done quickly and it's going to get done well. I had a lawyer one time who was a really good friend of mine, a guy by the name of Kevin Martingale, tell me about a book that he uses in his law firm to teach his younger people about follow through. And it's just, and the whole book is about All that this young man gets at the law firm is a note saying, get the memo to Garcia. He doesn't know who Garcia is. He doesn't know what the memo is. He doesn't know where he's supposed to go, but he's got to figure it out. And I just love that. I think it's such a great way to train up young workers in any profession. And I believe that in the Rob Cole system I was trained in. Rob Cole's the head coach at Cornell. He's one of the best coaches in the country, I believe, at any sport, and runs a great program. And he taught me that, Steve, you get the job done and you figure it out, and I think that that's an incredible way to be trained. I think it helped me get to become the coach that I am now and the person that I am now and the motivated guy that I am now, because I was trained in that environment where when something had to be done, there wasn't a lot of instruction going on. There wasn't going to be a lot of hand holding, but you better get that darn job done.
Man, what a great lesson. I mean, if people learn that alone, it's just the level of achievement and success and satisfaction you'll get in your life is incredible. So let's take this, Steve, and make it actionable. What, my listeners like to get something sort of actionable, something they can implement in the next 24 to 48 hours. Can you give us an action item that the listener can take in the next 24 to 48 hours to start moving toward their goals and whatever their goals are in their life?
Sure. I think to answer that, I'll just take the first pillar of our program is focus. And what that pillar means is essentially it's broken down into two categories. One is humility and the other one is honesty. Humility meaning you're going to humble yourself and admit that you don't have all the answers. Trust me, for an 18 to 22-year-old male, that's very hard to do. So when I sit down with my athletes, I say, guys, the first part of this pillar is that you have to understand that there's wiser, more experienced, more knowledgeable humans around you, all these people around you that care about you, that can help you in ways you never thought possible. Let's get with those folks. And so what I can say, how that applies to the average person, is listen and say, okay, get with somebody around you who cares about you, that you really believe has that wisdom you need, and get down and get a plan in place. And what focus means to us is getting a plan in place that's specific to the athlete. So it starts with humility, humbling yourself to ask that person to sit down with you and help you work on that plan. And then the next piece is, as you formulate that plan, and I do mean communicated verbally, but also writing down your plan, how you're going to get from point A to point B. You write that down. That takes honesty. Here's what I mean by honesty, and here's why I say that. It's very easy to talk about the things you're good at. It's extremely difficult to talk about the things you suck at. And I hate to use that word, but I really believe with all my heart that one of the hardest things you can do in terms of if you really want to grow is to lock in on your action items. And what I mean by action items is your weak areas, the things in your life that absolutely need to be fixed. I'm still struggling with those in my own life at almost 40 years old. You have to have people in your life that are, you said, unreasonable people in your lives that hold you to a higher standard. Well, they also need to be honest and love you enough to tell you the truth and tell you where you're failing and tell you where the areas you need to fix. And so as you write down this plan, the honesty piece comes in to be honest enough with yourself to admit the areas that you absolutely need to improve in and write those down and then formulate a plan to attack those areas. Hope that makes sense.
Makes a ton of sense. I strongly believe that you need to get that outside accountability. You got to get that coach, that mentor, that person, like you said, that can be honest with you and give you that honest, raw feedback. And we get that. It hurts, right? And as an athlete, we had that. Most people they drift out into the world and they don't have that. I think we just got to find that mentor, that mastermind group, that the people that can hold you accountable. I think it's so important to have that in your life.
The pastor of my church one time sat down with me, and trust me, I've got that in-house too. Jordan Lean just called me out on something this morning that it hurt like heck to hear, but he was right, and so that's all there is to it. And now it's up to me what I do with that information. And one of my mentors, the pastor of my church, Pastor Pete Hartwig, sat me down once and said, Steve, you got to quit the need to be loved. You have this incessant need to be loved. And you want everyone to love you. And that's a huge problem for you right now. And I wanted to punch him in his face when he said that. I wanted to double leg the pastor of my church and with the love of Jesus, because I was so upset. I felt so hurt. But the more I sat there and realized that this guy's looking me in the eye in love and telling me something that I need to hear, all of a sudden my defenses go down, and then I absorb that truth, and then it does hurt, but that it also that hurt then affects change in my life that's positive, and still working out through me today.
So Steve, I want to shift gears here now. This is a question that I ask all my guests. It's a tough question. It dovetails right into what we were just talking about, being really honest with ourselves and what we suck at. But let's look back at your life, and can you tell me about a time that you failed, a time where, you failed and you felt that hopelessness, that just overwhelming self-doubt that comes with failure, but also maybe how you were able to overcome it? How were you able to, deal with that and then still achieve success?
Sure, Dal, absolutely. I mean, there's one pivotal moment in my life that changed my life, and I can definitely get into that. It might surprise some folks. It wasn't on the mat. I mean, I failed plenty of times on the mat. I don't know how many times I lost in college, but it was a significant amount. And so I dealt with that failure, and every one of those failures, every one of those losses was personal and hurt. I mean, Jim, firsthand, losing a wrestling match is incredibly personal and incredible. It just hurts. It hurts more than I think other sports would, because it's just you out there and there's nowhere to run, and it hurts, man. Somebody's got your face and they're smushing into the mat. It's so public. However, I would say that the failure I want to talk about, as opposed to the athletic piece, is in my life. I felt like, so I had worked my whole life, and I told you I became obsessed with achievement, and I worked my whole life to get to what I thought was my dream job, where I do think is my dream job, here at Virginia as the head coach in 2006. And so I had everything that the world deems is a success. I had a security financially. I had literally a white picket fence and a beautiful home in Crozet, Virginia. I had the wife, beautiful. I had the kid. I had everything. I was working it. I was doing my thing. And what I looked around and realized is that maybe I wasn't failing in the world's eyes from a professional standpoint, but I was failing in my marriage, and I was failing as a father. What I mean by that is they were absolutely, without question, on the back burner, 3, 4, 5 rings down from the job. The job had now I had become so obsessed with building a program that I had forgotten about my wife and baby. And at the time, I only had one kid at the time. It was right around 2007. I can remember hitting rock bottom, and my wife was, she was close. She was close to taking Sarah and leaving, because I had gotten to the point where nothing else mattered besides winning. And that's the downside of being outcome fixated. That's the downside of when wrestling becomes who you are and it's not what you do, or coaching becomes who you are and it's not what you do. And my answer to that, I've heard you ask guys, well, how'd you overcome it? How did you work through that? Well, here's the thing. Here's what's counterintuitive. My whole life, I had been taught to fight and work harder. So if you're failing in your marriage, you work harder at it. If you're failing as a parent, you work harder at it. Well, the way I dug out of this, and who dug me out, I believe, was God. And it came through, not through fighting and not through working harder, but it came through submit and surrender. It came through submission and surrender. I got on my knees on my little bathroom floor in my townhouse in Crozet, Virginia, and I cried out to God and said, Lord, I don't know everything there is to know about you, but I'm messed up. And I can't do it on my own, and I don't want to do it on my own. I want you in my life, and I need help. And I submitted my life to Jesus Christ that day and surrendered everything and said, Lord, help me become – I don't like who I am right now, and I want to change that. I need you to help me change it. And that's when everything changed in my life. And I'm proud to say now that – or I'm grateful to say now that my marriage has never been in a better place. And I believe now with 2 children that I believe I am making a positive impact on my daughter's lives, both of them, Grace and Sarah. And oh, by the way, it's also changed everything about the way I approach my job. And I believe my relationship with my student athletes and my staff has never been better too. So sorry, I got emotional there for a second, but that's a time in my life where I couldn't have been failing anymore. And now in that moment of humility, true humility, submission and surrender has now resurrected me into a completely different person who, I think it all happened in that moment, that day.
So let me ask you this, for the person listening on the other end who's shaking their head, yeah, like I get it. I've been there. I know where you're at, and I know where you were, and that's where I'm at now. Where would you recommend they start?
Wow, that's a good one. That's a good one, Jim. I'll tell you, I would say the same place I did is humility and honesty. You're saying, look, I don't have all the answers. If anybody says they have all the answers, they're crazy, right? You say, listen, where can I go? And there's an answer. There's an answer to the restlessness and the emptiness and the hopelessness. And what I would say is, listen, the restlessness can be replaced by peace. The emptiness can be replaced with purpose. And that sense of hopelessness can be absolutely replaced with a secure hope. And I believe there's answers for all that. And that's what I would tell them is ask those questions. For me, it was getting in the Word of God. When I opened up the Bible, the answers were there. When I got mentorship from pastors and different men in my life who discipled me, my life was radically changed because I was getting saturated with truth. I was getting saturated with love, and heaviness was replaced with forgiveness, anger for joy, fear for courage, ignorance with wisdom. I mean, all these different things were getting poured into my life by people around me who loved me. And all it did, and it was just amazing. And the transformation was radical, and it was, and it happened very fast.
So looking back, what did, if you had a chance to talk to yourself when you were 20, looking back at yourself, your 20-year-old self, you're sitting down, looking across the table at your 20-year-old self, if you could offer yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
I love that question, Jim. And there's a song that I love that I've been stuck on for about a year now, and it's called Dear Younger Me. It's written by a group by the name of Mercy Me, and Mercy Me wrote the song about essentially Dear Younger Me, going back in time. What would I say to that person? What would I say to that 20-year-old me? Because the mistakes that I made shaped me, right? They shaped. I talked about the storms in my life that made me who I am, but what would I change, or what would I say to that Steve Garland at 20 years old? And I started fantasizing about that because I would love the opportunity to go back to 1996. Steve Garland, University of Virginia, Charlottesville, Virginia. He shows up. He's wearing cutoff khaki shorts and a tank top, and he's walking around campus. I'd like to grab that young man by the throat and sit him down and say, son, let me tell you what's up. Let me talk to you about what's real. And I would say, Steve, that anger you have, that heaviness, that restlessness that you feel, there's an answer for that. Do you know that empty hole, that hole that seems to keep getting bigger right through the middle of you, the one that you keep trying to fill with achievement, and you keep trying to fill with relationship, and you're trying to fill with all these things of the world, whether it be alcohol or whether it be all these other things, a national title, you think it's going to fill that hole? Let me tell you something, son. I got the answer for you, and it's not in that. The answer is not in anything you can find in this world. The answer is in a person, and his name is Jesus. And I want to tell you about this man. And I would begin to tell him. I would witness to him, and I would pour in him all the things that have been poured into me over the last 5 years, 6 years, and I wouldn't let him leave until he listened. And I think I fantasize about that because I would love to sit down and tell that person, Steve Garland in 1996, all those things, and then say, listen, I can't wait to see the impact you're going to make now. Instead of being me focused and focused so myopically on winning and getting a name for yourself and being known, instead you're going to focus on relationship. You're going to focus on the impact over outcome, and you're going to leave Charlottesville, Virginia, a better place when you leave. How awesome would that be to be able to go do that?
Yeah, that's incredible. Man, thanks, Steve. Thanks for sharing that. It's a powerful story. I appreciate our friendship. You and I have been friends for a long time, and you're just the perfect fit for this show. And I'm so glad that the listener stuck this long for for me and a good friend of mine, Steve Garland, to be able to share his story. Steve, talk a little bit about where people can follow you online, follow the team, et cetera.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Our Twitter, if you do, Virginia Wrestling, we have a Twitter account. We've got Facebook as well, and also just virginiasports.com is where you can follow the University of Virginia wrestling team as well. And so you can even just Google Virginia Wrestling, and those three things will come up. And definitely please follow us. We've got some amazing kids. We've got a lot of guys doing great things both academically and athletically. And so, I would love all the support we can get. Yeah,
and definitely follow him on Twitter. He always puts out some good stuff on Twitter. So, Steve, thanks so much for taking time. I know the season's right around the corner, so you're really busy, so I appreciate you making time for this.
You're welcome, Jim.
All right, for the listener, until next time, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success. Success Through Failure is a member of the Athlete on Fire podcast network. Check out all of our shows at athleteonfire.com.